So, yeah, I mean, as it's probably pretty clear from the music I play, not just specifically the songs, playing their songs, but overall just songs I've played on the show. I'm a fan of I think the Beatles are, the greatest band of all time. That's not really like an uncommon take or anything, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because as someone who's, liked them for a long time, there seems to be like a resurgence in interest in the Beatles in the past few years. And it's not like there's ever been a time where they haven't been popular. I mean, I think since they started, they've been, well, not literally since the day they started, but since they've gotten big, they've been the biggest band of all time. So it's not like there's ever been a time where they have not been popular, but there seems to have been like a resurgence in interest in them around the time of like that documentary that came out a few years ago, and then the new song that came out last year and all that. I feel like, I mean, pretty much every year there's going to be at least one interesting thing that happens related to the Beatles, considering how much of a big institution they are. But it seems like the last few years there's been a larger, like that's just been bigger than in past years, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I wanted to say that with that, one of the announcements that came out is that a few days ago, I think it was on Monday, if I have it correct, Disney started teasing some sort of like new Beatles news. And according to Ultimate Classic Rock, on their social media pages, Disney's, they posted a graphic with 4 white boxes in the same shape as the original Let It Be album with the caption, "There will be an answer." Above the boxes is the phrase "at last." And honestly, I had no idea what that would be. There was a lot of rumors that they were going to be re-releasing Let It Be. Not the album, actually, but the movie. For people who don't know, the album Let It Be came out in 1970, I think is the exact year. And around that time, there was like a documentary made about the movie, about the album, which was just documenting. There was like a camera crew inside filming them, which was basically supposed to be, documenting for the public how a Beatles album is made, I guess, or at least how that album was made, which was, an interesting idea. Although the thing that I think most people remember it for now is that when it was released, it ended up being the last Beatles album, and it ended up kind of, documenting their breakup in a way. I mean, if you watch the movie, you might not be able to tell that because so much of, there's a lot from their discussions and arguments and stuff that aren't included in the movie. In fact, sort of a side note, I remember seeing someone recently that the director, I don't remember his name, although I think he's still working. He's about the same age as the Beatles, so he's not super old or anything. I kind of imagine whoever would direct a movie like that would have been older than the Beatles by at least, 10 or so years. I don't know why, but I felt like a director who was put on to work on such like a big project as that would have been at the time, might have had a little bit more experience under their belt, but apparently not, which isn't like a bad thing or anything, but I guess they were about the same age as the Beatles, and I just bring that up because, I mean, okay, obviously the Beatles who are still alive are all like in their 80s now, so is this guy, but I don't know, he's not as old as you might think, I guess, or at least as old as I thought when I kind of started to learn about the movie, but he had said that apparently, I just bring him up because he said apparently he was unaware that the Beatles were breaking up when filming the movie, and that it was sort of surprising when they did, because before it was officially announced, it was known that the Beatles were going to take some time to work on like individual projects, which they all did. And I guess he apparently assumed that was like a temporary thing and they'd all be back to the Beatles as usual, I guess, after some time had passed, which obviously never happened, or at least never with all 4 of them. There have been some, songs by the Beatles that came out after the breakup, but not collaborated on by all 4 of them after John had passed away. So, yeah, I bring that up since the movie did technically document their breakup, but not really known to the production crew at the time. So I thought at first they were going to be re-releasing Let It Be with like, I don't know what, because I guess I assumed maybe either in theaters again, or maybe they'd be doing some really high definition version of it. Some people thought they were going to be releasing the album again, which I was kind of against that idea, just in terms of, I don't have anything against the album, obviously, like it's a great album, but there's already been, a lot of re-releases of it. And I'm kind of the mindset that I don't really care about like big re-releases unless they have any new content, or at least any new content that I deem worthwhile, which all the times in recent years the Beatles have re-released material, they have been. I have some of the re-released Beatles material, like one of the super deluxe version of Revolver. I have that. So I do have some of the re-released Beatles stuff, but I don't know. I'm not really enthusiastic about it if it's not coming from a place of like one of the scheduled, if that's what you want to call it, super deluxe albums. But, whatever. I guess also the thing is, maybe I think when people were talking about re-releasing Let It Be, most people thought it was the movie and not the album in any capacity. I thought it might be the album just because I'm not really sure about how the rights to the Beatles work is split up. You know, like I didn't know if Disney had some sort of say in like re-releasing an album or something, which I don't. Yeah, I don't really know if they do, but I don't know if they have any rights to releasing Beatles, you know, work in general if it's on like a case by case basis. If they have any ownership of the Beatles library, which I kind of hope they don't, just because like I don't dislike Disney or anything, but they seem to just remake things just for money. So I don't want to say just. I mean, there are times that they've done like remakes. I mean, technically that Get Back miniseries, if you want to call that a remake of Let It Be, I mean that was a really good remake if that's what you want to call it. So sometimes they remake things that are actually, you know, good, but most of the time it's not even about if they're good or not, but just that they shouldn't be. I think there should be a cap on how many times you can remake or like re-release something before it just, you know, we're done with that legally the law steps and we're done with that property. We need to like move on to something else. So yeah, I didn't really know if it was the movie or the album. I think to a lot of people it was more obviously the movie, but it was also interesting because I noticed that, I mean, I just thought it was weird that they would put it in such a weird way and take a few days to announce what it is, just because, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's just re-releasing something. I mean, it's not like they're going to announce the actual Beatles are getting back together and doing another concert. You know, they're going to dig two of them up and put them on stage or something. I don't really know why there was so much like weird ambiguity around it, but whatever. I mean, that's their marketing team's decision, I guess. But the guess that they were going to be re-releasing the movie to some capacity was that ultimately the case because, according to The Guardian, Let It Be has been restored by Peter Jackson's production company. And I don't really know what he has to do with it besides he made the Get Back miniseries. So I don't really know why they called on him of all people to do it. But I mean, I don't have a problem with it because he's, you know, it's kind of interesting because it's, in a way, it seems like he's almost become like the ambassador to Beatles stuff because he did the miniseries. And I don't remember what it was exactly, but he has some sort of hand in I think the production of the recent song they did. So, you know, good for him. I mean, that's got to be like for someone like him who's involved in film and likes the Beatles, you know, he's like, that's got to be like a dream job to work on, to have been a part of that song. I mean, I would do it if I had the knowledge of how to use AI or whatever efficiently enough to fix the audio. I mean, if I was him, I would have if I was hired to do it, I wouldn't tell them, you know, I don't really know how to do that because I want the job. So I would have just looked up like AI, one of those AI audio cleanup tools and just run it through that and, you know, see what happens and charge my fee, I guess. But, you know, I guess that's not for everyone. But apparently, actually, Peter Jackson even went further than that because, as according to The Guardian, he was, quote, the catalyst to this movie's re-release, which I don't really know what that means. I guess maybe he insisted upon it would be a good idea to release it, which maybe it would be. In fact, actually, I would say I'm glad they are doing it, which I'll get into why in a minute. So, yeah, good for him for working on that. You know, we collectively owe him one, I guess. And the reason that I think it is necessary to re-release it is because this thing I didn't really know about the movie. I have seen it before, but it was kind of a while ago, and you know, it's not like I'm super familiar with it. Out of all the Beatles movies, it might have been the one I've seen the least. Besides Help, I guess I haven't really seen Help. I don't think I've seen that one ever. So, besides that one, the thing is with the movie has not really been available in any official form since the early '80s, I guess. Which I think just means they haven't re-released it on VHS or anything like that since then, because low-quality bootleg versions copied from earlier VHS and Laserdisc releases have circulated among fans over the years, according to The Guardian. And yeah, so I guess that's. I mean, I guess I'm not really familiar in like bootlegging videotapes or anything. I don't really know why, considering that, you know, VHS and Laserdisc releases exist, but whatever. So I'm not sure why though. I mean, maybe it's one of those copyright dispute things again. Although I kind of doubt it was that because Peter Jackson was allowed to look at all the footage, you know, shot for that movie for the Get Back miniseries. Although I'm not going to pretend I have some great knowledge of how, you know, the production of that was. So maybe it was complicated. I don't know. But I don't know why it would have taken so long to re-release it on even like DVD in the mid-90s when a lot of movies were getting released on DVD. I don't know why that would have been so hard. You know, because, you know, it's the Beatles. It's not like a small band that not a lot of people know about. There must have been some sort of interest in seeing that footage again, but I guess I'm wrong. I don't know. And I kind of assumed that even without knowing about any of this, that there must be some version that exists. I mean, I think the time I saw it was just because it was earlier on YouTube and someone just posted it on YouTube and no one bothered to take it down. So I assume there must have been some higher quality version of the film, because up to 2021, that was the most in-depth version of the making of that album. Because that was before the Get Back miniseries, which I know that Peter Jackson said he didn't want to try to make that movie obsolete with his miniseries, but he kind of did. I mean, it wasn't on purpose, but because of that, until that miniseries came out, the Let It Be movie was the most in-depth version of the making of that album. So I thought someone would have released the movie in a higher quality at some point, but apparently I was wrong. So in terms of the movie itself, I don't really think there's as much reason to see it anymore now that there's the Get Back miniseries, which is the far superior version. Just in terms of, it doesn't make it obsolete in terms of I guess it's not technically a remake, because it makes it much clearer that they're breaking up. They include a lot of footage that I assume maybe the Beatles chose to keep out because they didn't want people knowing how bad the situation had become by the time that movie was in production. But I don't know if that's true or not. But Get Back, documents it a lot more clearly what was happening among the group. So it's, if you're into the Beatles, it's probably the version you're going to want to watch. But the thing is with Let It Be, it does still have a reason to exist, as if anything, as a part of history, and also it's much shorter. People are only kind of into the Beatles who want to watch a documentary about making one of their albums would probably prefer to watch that version, because the Get It Back miniseries is 8 hours or something. I think something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but and Let It Be is far shorter. It's only an hour and a half. Although to be fair, I don't know how much people who aren't really into the Beatles all that much would want to watch them making one of their albums. If they don't really include a lot of as much conflict or drama or anything as you would expect, considering a lot of that's just not in the movie. So I don't know, maybe casual Beatles fans or whatever wouldn't care about the Let It Be movie, but I think it's good that they would upgrade it to a higher quality. Although, to be fair, I don't really plan to see the new version. I mean, I normally would like to, but I think it's just going to be, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be exclusive to Disney Plus, and I don't have Disney Plus. I appreciate that they put it out in any capacity, but I kind of miss when movies would come out on physical media where you could just get it on Blu-ray or something. I mean, I'm not saying this isn't how it's going to be. I think you can buy DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever of the Get Back miniseries. I'm not sure though. So if you won't be able to get a Blu-ray of this, then I mean, I'm sorry to Disney, but I'm not gonna. I don't think I can buy it then. Just in terms of I'm not gonna get a subscription to Disney Plus just to watch the Let It Be high quality version. But whatever. I will say though, if they're gonna be upgrading it, would take more time. But what they might as well do, since all these, if Peter Jackson was able to go through the entire, history of the filming of that movie for the Get Back miniseries, he might as well just remake the movie shot by shot with a better quality video that he has access to, because that quality was really good. That was one of the most impressive parts of that miniseries, in my opinion, how good the quality of the video was. So they might as well just do that. But I don't know, maybe they've been doing that since Get Back came out, and that's why it's taken them so long to announce it, because I'm sure it would take a long time to just completely remake the movie from the ground up. But whatever. I mean, they put more work into it than I would into a project like this, so good for them, I guess. And for the people who do get to see it, I hope they can tell me, if it's any good. But on an unrelated note, this is the other thing related to the Beatles that or vaguely, I guess, that I wanted to talk about. But James McCartney, who's Paul's son, and Sean Ono Lennon, who's John's son, collaborated to make a new song. And according to People, James released the song, and it's called Primrose Hill. It's basically a James McCartney song that Sean Lennon is basically is a part of. And James wrote and composed it with Sean. And the thing about it is, I knew they were both musicians. I've heard that both of them did music. Although, if I'm honest, the only one whose songs I ever really heard that much from is Sean's. And even then, it's not a lot, I'm not really super familiar. I mean, out of all the Beatles' children, the only two I know that much of their work is Julian Lennon, who's John's other son, and Danny Harrison. I've heard them both, their music a bit, I'm probably more familiar with both of their music than either James or Sean's music. I mean, I'm sure they don't want to be compared like that because they're all trying to do their own thing, but just, for the record, I guess. And I think I had heard before that James McCartney was a musician. And the thing is with that, he's apparently Paul's only son, or at least maybe I'm wrong on that, but from my knowledge, he's Paul's only son. And I feel like when you're the son of Paul McCartney, you kind of have to become a musician. It's not even really a choice, considering that Paul is, in my opinion, as I've said before, the greatest musician of all time. So he kind of has no choice but to do this. Or at least one of his children had to. I mean, he has a few other ones, and to my knowledge, I don't think any of them do music. So, James has no choice. He kind of has to. But also, according to James, I thought it was interesting when I was reading about the song a bit. It came from, quote, "A vision as a child in Scotland on what was a lovely summer's day. Letting go, I saw my true love and savior in my mind's eye. Primrose Hill is about getting the ball rolling with me and finding this person." I'm going to be honest, I barely really understood what much of that meant. I mean, it's not his fault, though. It's my fault. I can't really comprehend the big words too good. And also probably sounded better when he said it, because I don't know what it is, but a lot of times when an American tries to repeat certain words as that a British person said, it just doesn't sound like lovely is a word that British people just say better. And I'm sure the title, like Primrose Hill, sounds better when a British person is saying it. But whatever, I can't like call him up or bring him in here, so you're just going to have to listen to me say it. But about the song itself, because I wanted to listen to it before I had it on the show, which I am going to play it on the show. It sounds kind of like a Beatle-y title, I guess. I mean, I know it's not an adjective, which I just kind of created. But, I mean, I don't want to compare the whole thing to the Beatles, although, because, I'm sure James kind of wants to do his own thing. But, I mean, he's working with John's son, so first of all, I'm sure he's kind of, like, aware that comparisons are going to happen, and I'm pretty sure he shouldn't be surprised people ask about it. But leaving, like, the Beatles comparisons out of it, while it did kind of sound like the Beatles, it was also its own thing, because it feels more recent than a song that would have come out of, like, the Beatles era. Like, I felt like, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't really listen to that. I don't keep up with, like, music and news that much unless it's with older bands or people, because that's just, when music was at its best, in my opinion. But I will say I can still tell it sounds a bit more recent, a lot of the composition of it, which I didn't expect it to sound exactly like a Beatles song or anything like that, so it makes sense. But I noticed someone who wasn't really familiar with James's work, I feel like he has a pretty different voice than Paul, which I mostly noticed because I think Julian and Danny have pretty similar voices to their fathers, and that's something that a lot of people have talked about. I've noticed a lot of people talking about, and I agree with. And honestly, I've never really heard him in like an interview or anything, so I don't know if he sounds much like him outside. I mean, like when he's not singing, if he sounds much like him. But I don't know. I don't know if I would have been able to tell he was Paul's son if I didn't know it already. I mean, by his name, I would have been able to tell. I mean, not that McCartney's not like I'm sure that's like a semi-common name, but, it's by his name, and then he does look a lot like Paul, actually. I've seen him in terms of like his face, so I guess you can tell he is Paul's son, just, not through his singing. But that's not like an insult to him or anything. He just sounds different, I would say. But it was pretty short, I noticed as well. It was like just over 3 minutes, and it felt it. I mean, not that 3 minutes is not very long, but to me, that I don't know why, but it just felt pretty short when I was listening to it. And it's not like necessarily a problem with the song, but I felt like it kind of ended when I thought that it, like, dang, it just started picking up. I thought it was just about to get going, but then it ended. Although it's not like a big deal, I guess. Maybe because it, left you wanting more or whatever, that makes it, it's a good thing. I mean, I guess it's better than if it went on and on. I didn't like it. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's, like, really that long for a song or short for a song. I guess it's, like, kind of depends on people's taste. But I just felt, I thought it would feel longer when I was listening to it, but no, it didn't really. But, yeah, overall it was a nice song. I mean, it was, like, a pretty mellow song, but it's maybe not as, like, hummable or catchy or anything as a lot of Beatles songs. And that's kind of where I'll stop comparing it to the Beatles because, I don't want to do that the whole time. But it does kind of invoke, like, a feeling of nostalgia, maybe, if that's the right word that he was trying to invoke, at least from the interview that I saw of him. So, yeah, I guess that is kind of, it did its job in that sense. So, yeah, I thought it was a decent enough song. And anyways, like I said, these two things aren't really that related at all, besides they're both, like, Beatles adjacent things. But, yeah, like I said, I mean, normally I wouldn't do a segment where I just combine kind of two relatively unrelated pieces of news. But I do like that there's kind of a resurgence of, Beatles popularity because, I like the Beatles. And if you haven't listened to the Beatles, well, okay, if you listen to this show that much, you have listened to the Beatles. But if you haven't listened to the Beatles much, you should because, they're a great band. And I'm glad that I feel like a lot of this stuff maybe will lead to more people who haven't heard their songs before. Now that there's that many, I mean, the vast majority of people on Earth have heard songs by the Beatles before. But hopefully this will lead to people who maybe haven't listened to them before, giving them a listen. So, yeah, it's kind of also the idea of what I'm going to do now where, as I mentioned before, I was going to play the song. So, yeah, I think we'll take a listen.